Hello, friends. Welcome to the More You Know podcast. I'm your host, Brian Yu. If you're always curious and wanting to learn something new, then this podcast is for you. For an hour a week, join me as I learn from people all around the world about their hobbies and interests, and hopefully it will inspire you to do further research on these topics. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the show. All right. Welcome to the podcast. Today we are joined by Richard Didor.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. It's always fun to come and talk, especially when you're not really sure where the conversation's going to go at the end of the day. So yeah, my name is Richard, and I like to say I've been a marketer and storyteller for 20 years in various capacities at various companies across the country, and along the way, I happen to write two books. I've run for office twice. I'm now a dad to a 16-month-old little girl, and so life is definitely interesting and challenging, but also every day is a new challenge, but also a new opportunity to live the best life that I can. And that's why I love coming on to shows like yours and just talking about kind of what I've learned, the research I've done, and how despite despite two campaign losses, each day again a new opportunity to do some good things.
Hey, at least you went up and ran. Like a lot of people wouldn't do that. So
Yeah,
kudos to you
yeah.
on that
It's
part.
there are days where obviously wish the outcome's a bit different, obviously, because you don't get into it without hopes of winning. But at the same time, it didn't work out for a reason, and the reason I didn't win the second time was because happened to my daughter was on the way, and so it allowed me to have actually more time with her at home than what I would have had I won. So, every thorn has a soft side too.
Indeed, indeed. And if the name Richard Dieter sounds familiar to you, it might be because he actually appeared on a TED Talk. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it was TEDx Upper East Side. That was I was at that event when I was living in New York City, and that's a story in and of itself. I'm sure we'll get into, but the event was really kind of cool. People from obviously all different backgrounds speaking about a lot of different things. My speech there at that event was all about this concept of fear and what it is in actuality and how it impacts us. A stat that still stands out to me today that I used then, and it's in my book, Running from Yourself, that we spend scientists and people much smarter than me analyze fear and this concept of worry, and they figured out that we as human beings spend 5 years of our life worried about things. You put in the 10 minutes here and the 20 minutes there, 5 years. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it's incredible the amount of time we waste. And so that's really what inspired me to dive in a little bit deeper into the concept of fear. And so that's what the speech was about. And it's all about how, A, what fear is, and B, how do you not let it take over you. We're all always going to worry about things, whether it's you get laid off and how am I going to pay for X, Y, and Z bill, or is my significant other going to say yes when I ask them to marry me? Like those are very common things, but how do you not let that be debilitating? So one of the things that's really interesting that a lot of people don't know and gets left out of the history books is we've all heard FDR's speech when he defines what fear is. His first line is, "First of all, let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself," and that's usually where the quote ends. But he actually has another line after that, which I think is way more important. He says, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself, nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror," and that's the definition of fear: is when it controls you, when it creates this fear within yourself that doesn't actually exist. And so when you finally can recognize that that's what it is, you have the ability to turn it into not necessarily negative, but it's going to be there. So how to use that to your advantage?
One thing that that when you were talking earlier, um, about how we spend 5 years of our lives in fear, this made me think of the concept of the younger generation. I know that when I was in college, I would talk to a lot of people, and they would. I want to say I don't know if it was like a fear or if it was a worry that they don't know what they want to do in life, and it's like people in high school too. they expect to know what they want to do in life, and I feel like they're just living in fear every day because they don't know what they want to do, and they're scared of like they're not going to be successful.
It's so funny because I was thinking about that just the other day. So I mentioned in, when I introduced myself that I've run for office twice. And when I was in high school, I wanted to run for office and I wanted to win. Like that was a very key thing that I wanted to do. And I remember in high school, I would send emails off to people who were successful, and I would ask them, what did you study in college? Is this path that I'm on gonna work out for me? Like I would send messages all the time because I was so worried that I would make the wrong choice that would hurt me in the future. And what I tell students now when I meet with them or give speeches to them, it's the choices you make today. While some of them can absolutely have negative impacts in the future, choosing what your major is, no, that is not a consequential choice when it comes to the overall success you're going to have. Now, if you pick the wrong one and you go all the way through college and you get the degree in something that you absolutely hate, well, then there's a problem. But for me, I knew that I enjoyed storytelling, I enjoyed communication, so I just picked a major in the communication world and I figured it out as I went. Because when I was in high school picking what to study, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram, all those things did not exist. So what I do
Hmm.
now on a day-to-day basis, they couldn't even teach me because it wasn't there. So eh, yeah, that's a perfect example of being so worried about the future that you forget that you know what, it's just a choice and you can change it as you go.
Yeah, because I can't tell you how many times like I meet people nowadays, and everyone expects like they think that society should kind of like have them figured out their life like from high school. And I just see these poor kids just like living in worry every day, and they're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm still in high school. I was like, you have time.
You got time.
If you were back, if you were living in our day right now, how would you kind of tell the kids to like, don't worry, and how would you really calm them in these situations?
I'd probably use examples like Zuckerberg, like Elon Musk, and yes, those are like the most successful people. But at the same time, Zucks went to school to be a computer programmer, and he kind of still does that. Um,
Hmm.
but he doesn't also, right? Elon Musk, who the hell knows what he went to school for? And he has a space company, a car company, and like, and like Jeff Bezos, Amazon, like he didn't set out to create what he's created. He created a book selling company, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't anything crazy that hadn't been done before. He just used a technology that was new to do it. Like you never know what tomorrow is going to bring when it comes to life and professional opportunities, and um, you can't let that fear of the unknown inhibit your ability to explore the unknown. And that's really, I think, the key, and especially for that next generation as they're coming up. Yeah, like if you're going to become a doctor, there's a certain path that you go on. Going to become a lawyer, there's a certain path. Um, but a lot of other things, there's kind of a big gray unknown out there, and that to me is where the magic can happen because you can kind of find your path as you go and make choices and change along the way. In the world of marketing, which is where I spend time. My first job was in nonprofit communication, and then I went to ad agency side, and I'm on the corporate side. So I make it up every time, every day, and that's fun for me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like with how the internet is today, if one thing doesn't work out for you, there's so many opportunities out there that the internet has made possible for us. The internet is just like a free playing field that is kind of like our blank canvas, and literally we can do whatever we want. Like you can do anything and probably make some type of profit online, which is beautiful.
It is beautiful, and it's that's the important thing that I whether it's an 18-year-old or a 38-year-old, that it's a never too late to go and do something that you enjoy, that you're passionate about, that maybe changes your path in life, and that's okay. I make the joke that I'm 30 now, I'm 36, and I still don't know what I want to do because each day it's something different. Like I love different things for different reasons, and um, I love to spend time in my garden. I'm not going to make that a full time gig, but I love it, right? So
Mm.
making sure that you're not afraid to explore those other pieces of you as they come along, because it's so important to have that joy in life. And by having those things that you do enjoy, it can reduce those your mind playing tricks on you, or you're thinking about things in a negative way all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. Walk me through what inspired you to write not one but two books. And I mean, that sounds like a daunting task to me. Like,
It is daunting, and I laugh about it now. So the first one was called Anything Is Possible, and this is actually the 10-year anniversary of that book, and that
oh,
was inspired
congrats.
by an Adidas ad campaign from God, probably 20 years ago now, and it was "Impossible is nothing." They had a lot of ad dollars and a quote that went with it, and that's when I was in high school. And my best friend and I played on the team together, and we would say that to each other because we both weren't the best, and we knew it, but we were going to do the best we could for ourselves and the team. And so I just kind of kept that in the back of my mind, that that would be a really good motivating book if I could find a way to frame it and do the research and come up with the stories. And so I think it's five, well, no, it would have been 10 years after I got out of high school. I wrote that one kind of as an homage to how we approached life and the game. And then the second book, Running from Yourself, which is what the TEDx speech was all about, it all started because I started to look at the Anything Is Possible. I was like, how can I update this? You know, the research has changed, the stories have changed. And the more I got into it, the more this concept of fear stood out to me. So a whole new book was born as opposed to just kind of an update, which was the original intent. And again, that's one of those things where writing a new thing from scratch is a lot of work. You know, what's it going to look like, and how am I going to do the research, and what's the point of the story, and so they were both meant to uh, be guides. So like Anything Is Possible is meant to be more of kind of a guidebook, whereas Running from Yourself is just meant to be kind of an introspective look at who you are, how you got there, so that you can make sure you go where you want to go.
One thing that I did want to ask you about in the process of writing books, and especially in today, a lot of people post on social media, so you have a lot of critics out there.
Yeah.
And for kids these days, I know critics can really get to them and kind of like scare them off to posting anything on social media. So did you have any fear when you were writing your books in the process of like, well, in the concept of like, what are my critics are, well, what are the reviews gonna say? Were you scared of like bad reviews, if any?
I mean, that's gonna happen. I mean, that's part of putting something out there, putting yourself out there, and you know, I think the fear isn't necessarily that someone's not gonna like it. The fear is that you get something wrong, and I think that's something that any creator of content, whether it be a book or a movie or a whatever the case may be, you don't want it to be wrong. Um, so using the way that I create it is I find the research, and I find the stories that you know anecdotally back up the research, and let that kind of be the guide. So I wasn't really worried that I would be wrong. Some people just don't like what you put out there, and that's just a nature of life. It's a nature of business.
You can't please everyone.
No, you can't please everyone. And I may be in a creative brainstorm, you know, next week, and I will be the first one to say this idea may suck or it may be the best one. I don't know, but I've got to say it, and whatever happens, happens. And that's kind of how I approach whether I ever decide to do a book number three, or you know, I go back out to the tennis court one day maybe. It's just all about putting yourself out there, because by putting yourself out there in whatever way that is, whatever way you're comfortable doing, it's about empowering yourself, and sometimes along the way you can empower others, and there's magic in that. There's love and compassion in that, and for yourself and for others. And so um, I never let the fear of someone not liking it stop me from doing it.
I can definitely agree. It's kind of like the mentality of like not caring of what other people think of you. So I can do like some goofy stuff in front of like random people, and they always like wonder like how do you have the balls to do that and like not think about what people think of you. And for me, it's really hard to get the point of like you can't please everyone, and I know that's easier said than done, but like there's billions of people in the world. Are you really gonna let like one person out of 1 billion or two really like affect how you live your life? Really?
Yeah, and you can't. I mean, that's just the key thing. Like, you can't let that one potential negative take away from the 99 who are going to love what you do. I mean, that's just you at that point. There's a really great quote that I keep in my back pocket, that failure is just success rounded down. Um, and so if you do stop yourself from doing something you really want to do, you've rounded down your own success. You failed at what you really wanted to do, but you're successful at what everyone else wanted you to do. You know, and there's no winning in that. And it's not about being the best tennis player or the person who wins every election they run in. It's about being true to who you are. And if that means you lose every time, that means you lose every time. You know, I made the joke earlier that I was not the best tennis player. In fact, my senior year of high school, I was number 5 on the tennis team. And I did my best to be the best number 5 I could be. And that meant not having an ego that number 1 through 4 were ahead of me. They were better than me. My job, my role was to be the best number 5. And I did the best I could. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad. And it was I didn't want to fail the team in that position, right? Like, if I were to play number 3, I'd be failing the team because I'd lose. So understanding where your strengths are, play to those, and limit the exposure on the weakness side helps eliminate some of that fear as well. You know, I can be the best number 5 because that's where you need me. That's where we have a hole. So let me step up and step in and lean into that. And there's tremendous security in that, but it's still there are times when I wasn't the best number 5, and so you have to push yourself in those moments as well.
Hmm. Yeah, become just be the best version of yourself and just make do with what you have. Um, what what you possess today, no one else possesses, and you are unique. That's what I like to tell a lot of people, is that you are very unique. No one can do what you do in the same exact manner. You are the best at what you do, so you're you're a really bright light. Just shine.
Yeah.
Just shine. But it's hard. It's harder said than done. I get that, but I think it's just more of like the more that you practice it, the more that it will become into fruition.
Yeah, and you know, life is a journey. You know, we're all on this experience together, and we all have our peaks and our valleys, and recognizing that that's the truth is also empowering, because when you can recognize that today's just not my day, maybe I don't lean in as hard today. Maybe I accept the fact that today's going to be a tougher day, right? And tomorrow I can get back up and go after it again. That's okay. I mean, that's when you recognize that about yourself, you're taking that power. You're not giving that power up. You're recognizing that today has limits and tomorrow doesn't at this point. And so um, when you do that, you almost empower yourself to do better tomorrow. And I think that, going back to what you brought up about, you know, high schoolers and those kind of picking their path today, for what tomorrow's going to be, that's the whole point, is that we can get so worried about being successful today that we forget there's still tomorrow, there's still the next day, and it's okay if today's an off day.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that because I find myself like being hard on myself whenever I have a tough week, and it's only like Monday when I have a tough week, which Mondays are usually kind of rough for like everyone. But you always have to remind yourself that 1 out of the 5 days, like if you mess up on one day, there's still time to make that up. Tomorrow's a fresh new day, and it all depends on what your attitude is, uh, of how you want to go at it. If you're still hung up about your failure on Monday and it brings into Tuesday, then yeah, it's gonna drag on throughout the week. But you always just got to remember that um, every day is a new opportunity, and you got to make the best of it because days are limited, and fear and not and like for me, not even fear can like get me to like uh kind of like hold myself back from doing anything because days are limited. Your days on earth are limited. Time is a valuable resource.
Well, and for us, for our time here on Earth, time is a finite resource, and
Yeah.
we want to spend it worried and upset about the mistakes we made or the chances we didn't take, or are we just going to take the opportunities tomorrow? And I laugh. You brought up Monday. Like, when did Monday become a bad thing?
I love
This
Mondays.
morning it's like,
I love Mondays.
yeah, like let's go get it, right? It's time to go. And today for me, we're taping this on a Monday, was a great day until I got a phone call that my daughter was sick, and then that day got off the rails and had to go deal with that. But uh, again, life happens, and you take it as it comes. But you get to choose your attitude every step of the way. You
Yeah.
can't cede that to someone else.
Hmm. I totally agree. And my final topic that I wanted to bring upon is your TED Talk. Um, were you always a big public speaker type person?
So I was always good at it, and my classmates hated me for it because I wasn't afraid to give a speech. So when it was time to give speeches in class, I would go pretty early in the rotation. Yes, I'll go. And they hated me because I would set the bar higher than than they wanted it. And I'm like, you could go before me. You had the chance. But yeah, I honestly love getting up in front of audiences and talking. I it's funny because no one in my family likes doing it, so it's not something that ran in the family, but I do. It's just something I enjoy. I get energized by it. I actually gave a before everything kind of shut down with COVID. I gave a speech at a theater here in Iowa where I live, and it was an auditorium of 1,200 people. And it was a nighttime event, so like the way the lights are set up, you really can't see anybody, which is super weird. You can hear them when they laugh or gasp at a story, but yeah, I absolutely love it. And that's not to say that backstage, like the butterflies aren't going crazy. They are. Um, but I just love walking out on that stage and telling a story.
That's very interesting, actually, because I myself I like public speaking. Like personally, I do, but my body is like when I first get up there and I look at everyone, my mind starts racing. But like personally, for me, I like going out first. I like actually doing public speaking. But I know that when I was in college, we would have to do presentations in one of my business classes, and everyone hated it. I know that a lot of people have like a fear of public speaking. What would you say to those people to like kind of help them through of getting over the fear of public speaking? Because I know that thoughts get in your head of like, oh my god, everyone's laughing at me, or oh my god, no one's paying attention to me. How would how would you help that person out?
Yeah, so that's such a great question, and there's a lot of ways to unpack that. So let's just pretend that most like high school and college presentations are between 5 and 10 or 12 minutes long. Okay, let's just agree that that's the norm on
Yeah,
those presentations.
sounds about right. Yeah.
Well, at the short end, that's the length of one song, right? At the long end, that's not even half of a sitcom, right? So you're talking a really small amount of time when you really look at how much time you do other things. So that's point number one. Point number two, how often were you in the audience when they started to laugh at you? Now, sometimes it happens, like if you're giving a speech and you make a funny joke or you totally mispronounce someone's name or what, like, okay, so it's happened, but not very often. They never boo you off the stage. They don't throw things at you. There's not a trap door that's going to make you fall through the floor. Nothing bad will happen to you. And I'm speaking as someone who's been on a stage, tripped over power chords in front of an audience, forgotten lines. It the worst that happens is that they know it happened, but more times than not, they have no idea that you did something wrong. And so that's really what I would say when it comes to in class public speaking. It'll be over pretty quick, and if they're not paying attention to you, that's okay, because the only audience that matters in the classroom is the one who's giving you the grade.
Do you have any like tips of like when you're on stage to like calm your mind?
You know, that's a really good question. And for me, it's always I've always taken the approach, whether it be just a test or a speech, you practice, you practice, you practice. You know your outline, you kind of know your main points. And sometimes how you get to those main points kind of change, sentences change here and there to because you forget a sentence that you knew you wanted to say. But so long as the main points are hit, you're okay. But at the end of the day, if you have to take a pause just to think through where was I supposed to go next, sometimes the audience thinks that that's for effect. Like, oh, I should be thinking about what he just said. Well, you're in the back of your mind, where the hell am I supposed to go next? What bullet point was like? If you don't look scared, if you don't freak out, it will. Most of the times, it'll smooth itself out. Um, but if it's kind of an informal presentation and it makes sense, you can make light of it. I don't know where I was supposed to go next. It was going to be a really good line, but you'll just have to take my word for it. Like you can totally play with that. But again, it's I do speaking for a living, and I forget lines. I forget the punchlines of stories. It happens. Um, we're not we're not Barack Obama up there. So
I like that. I like that method that you said about like if you forget a line and you just kind of sit there and just let it like in silence trying to think, and then that kind of forces the audience to like kind of think of like what you said.
yeah,
And then all you gotta do is just remain calm and try to think it over in your head, but just keep your composure. Yeah, I kind
it's
of never really thought about it like that.
it's no different than what an athlete does in the heat of competition. If it's a basketball player and it's time for free throws, like take the extra breath, right? Or the football player, like if you need to call the timeout for 30 seconds, it's harder on the podium to do that, but you can think of it that way. That whether it's an athlete or a business person or a teacher, we all need timeouts, so it's okay.
Mhm. Wow, are you sure you don't want to do like presentations on how to like do public speaking? 'Cause that was good. That was good. I mean, like, just thinking back of like my presentations, that kind of makes me feel better about like my random pauses now, trying to think of like what I said or like what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because like we are our own worst critics, and nothing's ever going to change that. But the speech I gave at that auditorium recently, I missed a whole paragraph, and there was a really key point in that paragraph that I wanted the audience to get. But as I'm standing up there and I got to where that paragraph was supposed to be, I paused. I let my mind try and find that paragraph. I couldn't. So I jumped to there's a limit to how long you can stand up there in silence. Um, but I skipped over it and I still made the point. It wasn't as strong as it could have been had I remembered that single paragraph. But, I knew where the end of the story was going. And so that, like, for the most part, unless you forget the entire story, you'll be just fine.
That's good advice. That's good advice. Well, that's all that I have for you. One thing that I do want to like end this podcast with is like what is one key takeaway of what people can do to just kind of like a TLDR of this whole podcast. Um, how can people live life with no fear or conquer fear? How can
Yeah,
people conquer fear?
yeah, fear's going to be there. And I think that's probably a really important takeaway. Fear will be there, but you have to let it sit in the back and not, at the front of your brain necessarily. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have our challenging moments. But it's when you embrace your own life and embrace the opportunities that are there that failure becomes an afterthought.
Where can people find you?
So they can find me on Twitter and Instagram, and it's Richard Dedor, one word, or my website, which is richarddedor.com.
All right. Thank you so much, Richard, for coming on to the podcast. It was a pleasure having you on here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.